Great. So thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight at the Functional Medicine Discussion Group of Santa Monica. A lot of times people refer to it as a functional forum, which doesn't really bother me, but it's James Maskell's, that's his thing, and so, he has a patent on that. So this is a functional medicine discussion group, for whatever that's worth. But we've got some great speakers lined up. We've got Dr. Felice Gersh tonight, and I'm really excited that she's joining us. In 2 weeks, we have Tom O'Brien coming, and he's going to speak about brain health. And then September, it's 2 weeks after that, but I don't know if it's the 26th or something. Kent Holtorf is going to talk about peptides. And
what is that?
Kent Holtorf.
Yeah. What's the date on that?
Whatever the fourth Thursday in October is, and September, sorry. So that will be the 26th. That'll be the 26th. And just today I got a commitment from Carrie Jones from Dutch Labs. She's going to fly out to speak on October 24th. Talk about Dutch hormone testing, so that's really great. And we don't have a speaker yet for November, December. We're not going to have a meeting. January, we're going to do integrative pediatrics. So I want to say a word about Metagenics. They're our sponsor for this evening, as they have been for every one of our meetings. So we really appreciate Metagenics and for providing us with some healthy food. I don't know how many here use Metagenics products? Okay, a lot of us. So your next order, if you're at 12 or more products, you'll get 20% off. You can use the discount code. They're going to be changing over their inventory system at the end of the month. So I was told to tell everybody, put your order in quick. By the 26th or 27th, it'll probably take a week to get you'll still get the discount, but it'll take a week to get your order instead of, we're used to a few days.
Well, it'll be a few days if you get it in by the 26th. If you place your order on the 27th, it's probably going to be a week out. So just try to bulk up.
Right.
Thank you.
Bulk up.
That's what.
I don't know how many of you use Estrovera. How many? Has everybody used Estrovera with patients? So that's it's a great product for your women who don't want to take hormones. It's super effective for hot flashes and night sweats. It's very safe. It's an estrogen beta receptor agonist. Very interesting compound. Please check out my Rational Wellness podcast on Apple Podcasts, and there's also a video version on YouTube. Had some great interviews. Most recent podcast we just put up this week is with Dr. Sandeep Gupta from Australia, and we're talking about mold and chronic illness. Dr. Felice Gersh is an internationally known speaker, gynecologist, author of, everybody's got a copy of her new book, which is PCOS SOS. And we are very, very fortunate that she took time out of her busy day to drive all the way from Irvine in heavy traffic and to do it on 2 weeks' notice. Thank you so much, Dr. Gersh. Yeah, take that away.
So who loves stories?
All of us.
So, of course. Now, don't you like the font that I picked for the mystery of Menopause? Doesn't it remind you of an Agatha Christie book cover? Yeah. From what? Yes, like one of those old-fashioned kind of mysteries. So I love fairy tales. I think you all know that. So one of my favorites is Cinderella, because Cinderella has it all. There's conflict and drama and suspense and love and a happily ending to the story, right? It all ends happily ever after. So let's say Cinderella was about what? Maybe 20, and her prince was maybe 23. So let's fast forward about 35 years. Now Cinderella is 55, right? So you all know the Disney version, the cartoon, the gorgeous little waistline. She was so cute. So what do you think she's going to look like? Say she went through menopause a little early because she had early life stress, right? So yeah, she went through menopause like at 47. So now she's 8 years out. She's 55. Do you think she's going to look the same? Maybe not. So that's the mystery, right? What happens to a woman's body? Have you all had patients whose body morphs in front of their eyes and they come in and they say, I don't know what's happening. Yeah. Like I'm doing everything the same, right, and my body is changing shape. I've become a shapeshifter, right? Right. And yeah, and it may have happened to some of you, and this is it's a news bulletin to those of you who have not reached the age of menopause. You will go through it. I warned some people. So there are some things in life you cannot change, right? You can meditate. You can eat tons of great food, exercise, and you may delay the onset of menopause. And that is a good thing. And that's something we should strive for with our patients and clients. But no matter what, you're going to hit menopause. So what we want to deal with today is solving the mystery of Cinderella, who wondered what happened, when she hit 47, and it just, her libido wasn't so good anymore. She was having mood swings, hot flashes, wasn't sleeping well. So let's help Cinderella to have her real happily ever ending to her story. So we'll change. I'm going to give you a signal. It'll be this.
I guess I'll use the mouse.
Oh, it's not set. Oh.
Try again. Okay. Good.
Yep. Oh,
there we go.
Okay, so why would we even bother with menopause and treating it? Well, the average weight gain is 10 pounds, but that's early on. If you go about 20 years, it's going to be closer to 30. There's a lot of weight gain, and it's not muscle mass, unfortunately. But our goal is to try to make it lean body mass, but it typically is visceral fat, the kind we don't want. Bone loss, all the issues involving the cardiovascular system, which we're going to go over, mood. Who has more depression, men or women?
Women.
And who has more anxiety? And it's women, and it's about double. And after menopause, it goes up even more. And who has more GERD, gastroesophageal reflux, over the age of 50, men or women? Women. Yeah, women after men. Who has more strokes? Women. And it's equal for heart attacks. So we'll see. So all of these things, who has more osteoarthritis? Women. So I give clues and I give quizzes. So usually, I'm kind of mixing things up a bit here. So usually when I give quizzes, the answer is estrogen. You knew that, right? But I'm not going to let you just sleep on your memory banks, like, oh, it's always estrogen, and you could like doze and I pick on you, and then you say estrogen. Okay, so it's going to be women, okay? Remember that. If I ask a quiz question, the answer will be women. Okay, now raise your hand if you are a woman. Okay. And why do we always outnumber the guys at these meetings? Come on, bring your husbands or partners or friends or males. We gotta get more men in here. By the way, for you guys who are here, hooray, right? Because men should love learning about women's health too. So thank you guys for being here.
But also women go to women practitioners a lot.
They do, I know. But a lot of times when I speak, maybe that's why. Why are there always so many women in my audiences? But I love it when guys come. And look what ends up happening for typical women. Of course, this is like typical Americana, right? 5 to 7 pharmaceuticals to address every one of those problems. right? At least one per problem, right? And at least a doctor for every problem, a different one. So that's pretty complex, so we don't want that. So here's my symbol. Okay, so estrogen, which is not the answer to the question because I didn't ask one, right? But it is a major overlooked factor in all aspects of women's health. Estrogen is about so much more than reproduction. It's about every system, the cardiovascular, the brain, and you know, brain, cognition, and mood are really totally intertwined, right? So people who have Alzheimer's have tremendous mood problems, right? So it's all linked. The musculoskeletal system, I mentioned osteoarthritis, osteoporosis. Now, I gave a talk, and I had to fight to give that talk, because it was on bone health. And you know what the response was when I said I want to talk about bone health? Bones are boring. Nobody will listen. That didn't happen, fortunately. And bones are not boring. Bones are incredibly important, and they are metabolic endocrine organs. When you don't have adequate bone, you're not going to have proper metabolic function. Bones make a hormone. Who went to medical school 1,000,000 years ago? You don't have to raise your hand, but I did. Okay, 2 of us went. And we were taught there were like 4 endocrine organs. Now we know everything is an endocrine organ just about. And bone is an endocrine organ. It makes a hormone called osteocalcin, which is key to cognition, mood, and glucose regulation. So bones are not boring, and bones go down the tubes in women after menopause. And we need to try to prevent bone loss, because once it's lost, it's really hard to put it back. And of course, osteoarthritis. Where I am in Irvine, we're near what's called the Hoag Orthopedic Institute. And they line them up and replace hips and knees, and the majority are actually women. Men get in there too, but more joints are replaced in women. Joints are meant to last a lifetime. We need those joints. And immune health. Who is more likely to survive in an epidemic, men or women? You all know the answer. Women. Yes, women. Women have way more robust immune systems so that they will survive. So remember, everything in the body is about survival for the purpose of reproductive success. So you may think reproduction is like an added-on feature, but that's the center of the universe. That's the prime feature. And every other organ system is there to support reproductive success. So the immune system of women has to keep a woman alive in case there's an infection, because they have to have the pregnancies and nurse the babies. So have you ever thought, why are women smaller than men? Like, why is that? Because so much of the energy in a male goes into making him big and strong with bigger bones and bigger muscles. And that takes a lot of energy. And in women, a lot of our energy goes into supporting our very robust immune system. And that's why we produce more antibodies, we have more lymphocytes, more B cells, and when things go wrong, they go wrong on a bigger scale in women. So women make up 80% of autoimmune disease. Who has more autoimmune disease?
Women.
Yeah. After menopause, the incidence of rheumatoid arthritis skyrockets. Anyone in here have a family member with rheumatoid arthritis? It's very common, and it's terrible. And it's associated with cardiovascular events. You know, a lot of times the rheumatologists kind of forget that piece. And the genitourinary system, of course, has estrogen. So this is not even comprehensive, but it shows that estrogen has receptors everywhere. So think what happens when you don't have much. So estrogen is produced predominantly during the reproductive years in the females in their ovaries. Now men make tons of estrogen. So you love estrogen, right? Because during the reproductive years, men make 6 to 8 times as much estradiol in their brains as women do. But it's not a problem for women because we make it from our ovaries. But after menopause, the brain does not pick up the slack. So who has more Alzheimer's disease?
Women.
Yeah, by almost 3 times. Because we have deficit of estradiol in our brains. So that's a problem for us. So estrogen is everywhere. So here's just some very basic stuff. You probably know that we discovered that there are 3 types of estrogen receptors: alpha and beta and membrane. And they're all ultimately essential. And we'll see. Alpha, remember, they regulate the genes. Alpha and beta are predominantly nuclear receptor related, but not completely. We now know they also work on the membranes. And it's complex. And then there are also receptors on the membranes. The receptors on the membranes create very rapid effects, like creating kinases, whereas you transcribe a protein from the nuclear receptor. And the alpha is very heavy in the reproductive type of functions. So it's in the hypothalamus. It's predominant in terms of triggering the production of the gonadotropins, that LH and FSH. It puts out triggers the releasing hormones. But it's even more complex. I'll show you a slide that shows how complex alpha and beta are. So in nature, women make predominantly from their ovaries estradiol, which has receptors function for all of these. Estriol, which we'll talk about more, is predominantly beta, and estrone is predominantly alpha. And estradiol is a balance of them both. So,
Can I just stop you for a second?
Sure.
The membrane-associated receptors, I'm not that familiar with that.
Sure.
Where does that come into play?
Yeah.
when you have very rapid responses, predominantly, for example, nitric oxide. So nitric oxide is made both through the nucleus and also through the membrane. So when you need a rapid response, like you want to make AMP kinase. Have you all heard of AMP kinase? So that's,
Anti-aging, right?
well, it helps you to burn fat and make energy. So estrogen is very key, and I have a slide I'll show you about mitochondrial health. Estrogen helps us to burn fat. After menopause, women have less ability. They have mitochondrial dysfunction, and they can't burn fat. And the membranes help to create the AMP kinase, which is a rapid response, and also nitric oxide, because we need to have rapid response. It takes hours, many hours, to make these proteins through the nucleus, but estrogen through the membrane creates very rapid response when needed. And the consequences of menopause can be thought of as a consequence of loss of estrogen production. Because everything I was telling you about is correlated with estrogen deficiency. If a woman goes through menopause, like Cinderella, a little on the earlier side, all of these problems start to develop earlier. The later you push out menopause, the more you delay these. But don't think that menopause is crossing a finish line. It's a process. I would like to lobby to get rid of the word menopause. You know, thank you, because it sounds so romantic, and you know I'm a romantic. Meno is the Greek word for moon, and pause is stop. Okay, so the moon cycle has stopped. But it's really ovarian senescence. It's really about the process of ovarian aging, which is not sudden. That's why this whole nonsense of, are you in menopause? Did your period stop for 12 months? What the heck, who cares? It's a process, right? So you start having all the problems of estrogen deficiency before the stopping of the period. And even after the period stops, does estrogen production completely cease at that point? No, it's just that ovulation has stopped. But you still have some follicles, and you can still make estrogen that can linger on for even a few years. And that can be unopposed estrogen, right? And that can lead to hyperplasia of the endometrium in women who have inflammation in their bodies. They can develop precancerous lesions from this unopposed estrogen in an inflammatory state. And we'll talk about that with breast as well. So all of these problems are related. No, you can go ahead, that's good. So here, just looking at this really nice slide, and this is really talking about energy balance. So, I try to reference everything. So here we see when everything is right in the sort of lavender color, you have energy balance. It's really important to understand energy is the life force. Like, what makes you different from a rock? Because a rock can only reflect energy. It's not creating its own energy from, like, eating, right? So you're not a rock, you're a person, and you need to have estrogen, and men need estrogen, but they make it on site. That's why endocrine disruptors are also called obesogens, right? Because they destroy our ability to create energy and energy balance. When you lose estrogen, or you have like an endocrine disruptor, you get obesity. Now Cinderella's getting the picture. And when you have estrogen, you have adipose health. I was taught that fat was just so that when you sat on the hard bench, it was more comfortable. But it turns out it's also an endocrine organ, right? And it has a whole slew of adipokines. And they are very much about maintaining energy balance. For example, leptin. Have you all heard of leptin? What hormone, I forgot to tell you, sometimes I throw in trick questions. Okay, but you're going to get this one for sure. What hormone is key to regulating? Leptin, the hormone of appetite regulation. What hormone?
Estrogen.
Yes, good job. Okay, so when you don't have estrogen, what happens to your fat tissue? You get inflammation, altered production of adipokine, and obesity. The pancreas. The beta cells require estrogen for proper health and function, and when you don't have estrogen, you're more likely to get diabetes. Every woman becomes to some degree insulin resistant when she goes through menopause because you need estrogen for beta cell function. The liver, the metabolic powerhouse of the body, requires estrogen for all of its functions, and we'll see some of the enzymes that are responsible that estrogen regulates. And when you don't have estrogen, fatty liver, which is about as dysregulated as you can get. When you have a fatty liver, you also typically have fatty pancreas, fatty heart, fatty muscle, fatty bone. And when you have fatty liver, you get uncontrolled gluconeogenesis. So you spew out glucose from your liver and triglycerides with no reason, because your body doesn't want it. It just keeps it coming out. So Cinderella probably has fatty liver. In my office, I do a lot of ultrasounds of livers. It's an epidemic, and it's very common in women who are in menopause, also in my PCOS women, because they have a lot of similar metabolic dysfunctions. So it can't be really diagnosed without an ultrasound. Muscle is a powerhouse for metabolic function, and when you have proper estrogen, you have proper regulation of energy and insulin. Remember, muscle isn't just about moving, just like bone. They didn't put bone in here, but you could. And then when you don't have estrogen, you get insulin resistance and impaired glucose homeostasis, and that's a macrophage. The immune system, which was on the previous slide, has estrogen receptors. The adaptive immune system, the innate immune system, all of your T cells, all of your B cells, your macrophages, your mast cells, your neutrophils, they all have estrogen receptors. The innate immune system is primarily alpha, and the adaptive immune system is primarily beta. Isn't that interesting? Now, here are some of the genes that are regulated by estrogen. Isn't that pretty extensive? You see everything here that's sort of involving metabolic health. And we could spend like a day just going through each one, and we'll go through just a few. See, there's leptin. I didn't make it up. See? Okay, and we'll talk about a few of these. Oh, by the way, anyone ever hear of this one?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, for cholesterol. Estrogen. That's why after menopause, cholesterol goes up. There are other reasons, but that's one. Okay. So estrogen is so important in the heart that not only does estrogen have receptors all over the heart, but there are these others, they used to call them orphan receptors. Now they call them estrogen-related receptors. We don't even know what the ligand is. That's what binds to the receptor. We don't even know what that is. But it's so important that you have to have estrogen present for that binding to occur. And these are critical. It turns out the estrogen-related receptors are critical for creating energy. So the tissues in the body that have the most estrogen-related receptors, the heart and the brain. And as we'll see in a minute, women in menopause have a very high incidence of problems with their heart, myocardium itself. So the estrogen itself isn't just so important, and being around for these other ligands, but the metabolic byproducts of estradiol are so important. So one of the key metabolic byproducts of estrogen metabolism is 2-methoxyestradiol. It turns out that that is very important in regulating the whole angiotensin system. How amazing is that? So when you have bad detoxification of estrogen, so you don't have a healthy liver, you don't have a healthy gut, and you don't produce the right metabolite, you're more likely to get hypertension. This estrogen metabolite is so key for cardiovascular health. So if we look here, E2 stands for estradiol. It's in the center. There's the heart. So look, estradiol is essential for the mitochondrial function of the heart, to control oxidative stress, prevent fibrosis, and maintain proper vascular function. So when you have proper estradiol, then you have vasodilatation with endothelial nitric oxide synthase produced. You have VEGF so that you can create new collateral blood vessels. You want to have collaterals? Lots of them? Sure. You need estradiol. Maintaining proper energy production and reducing reactive oxygen species, maintaining cell survival, and reducing fibrosis. Metalloproteinase causes cardiac remodeling. Okay? You do not want to remodel your heart. Who likes to remodel their house? Maybe, but not your heart. Do not remodel your heart. And when you do that, then you get hyperplastic areas of the heart muscle. Then the valves. You ever wonder, why do people have valvular problems when they get old and need heart valve replacement? Like, why is that happening? Because their heart is remodeling and the valves are not fitting together properly anymore. Loss of estrogen will promote that happening. Diastolic dysfunction. A lot of cardiologists ignore this on their echocardiograms. They just say it's normal. Well, it's common, but that doesn't make it good. So in women, they have a really different heart than men. Remember, women are not men. They're really different. They're different. I already told you they're very different immune systems, right? Oh, I forgot to tell you, testosterone downregulates the immune system. So they have their own immunosuppressant. That's testosterone, so that they don't spend too much energy with their immune system. So women with their heart muscle, as without estrogen, the heart becomes stiffer. It has less energy. So this is my hand, but pretend it's a heart. Okay, this is what the heart does. Contract, relax. Contract, relax. Push out the blood, fill with blood. Well, we've always paid most attention to contract. If you don't contract, that's congestive heart failure, right? If you don't have enough contractile function, and they weren't paying much attention to relax. That's like only paying attention to the daytime and forgetting the sleep time, right? We know sleep time is just as important as daytime. The same thing with the heart. The little bit of relaxation the heart gets, that's really important. So this one, it goes like this, that's represented in the systolic blood pressure, the high one. And when it relaxes, the blood pressure goes down, that's representing the diastolic, the lower number. And so they call it diastolic phase of the heart when it's filling. Well, it turns out that on ultrasound, the echocardiogram, they can actually see in a woman's heart that it doesn't relax well. It's stiffer, and that's diastolic dysfunction. And over time, that can lead to congestive heart failure. And women have very significant rates of congestive heart failure. But it starts with diastolic dysfunction, which is often ignored. That's the heart crying that it doesn't have enough mitochondrial energy production. So estrogen is in the mitochondria, the energy factories of the body. So here it shows estrogen and mitochondrial function. We eat too much. See, it says overnutrition. That's a nice way of saying eating a bunch of garbage, the standard American diet. And here's, look, estrogen to the rescue. And it's not just alpha, and it's not just beta, it's alpha and beta. The poor membrane doesn't get talked about a lot, but it's always in there too. So look what happens. You make NO. That's not for no. That's for nitric oxide. Nitric oxide used to really confuse me because I would read one article and it would say inducible nitric oxide, and they're talking about inflammation. So inducible nitric oxide is what happens when you have an inflammatory response, and it just very briefly is nitric oxide, then it goes down the path to making one of the more toxic kind of products. And that's part of the immune system response. But that's not what this is about. This is about nitric oxide that is key. It's a gas signaling agent that we'll talk a little bit more about that's really essential for vascular health. Estrogen gets it there, and it causes proper function with calcium, smooth muscle relaxation, and then you have transcription of metabolic and mitochondrial genes. So the mitochondria work. And then what do you get? Increased oxidative phosphorylation. You know what that means? Burning fat and making energy. Increased lipid oxidation, burning fat. Decreased lipid in skeletal muscle. Decreased insulin resistance, obesity, and diabetes. And here you can see, I put this up, E2, remember, stands for estradiol. See, it's everywhere. This is the mitochondria. See, everywhere you look, you see E2. Sirtuins. Have you heard of sirtuins? That's like a big lecture for another day. But sirtuins are type of enzyme, histone deacetylases, that actually are post-transcriptional. After the protein is made, they're modified by the sirtuins. And sirtuins are what are triggered by fasting. If you ever wonder, like, what is the mechanism? Part of it is triggering sirtuins. Sirtuins are really important for making energy. That's why it's all part of the longevity program that people will talk about. And in order to create the energy, the sirtuins need NAD. Okay, wake up, trick question. What hormone is essential for the production of NAD? Well, now you know why it's my favorite hormone. And have you all heard of superoxide dismutase? That's a really important enzyme. Very important so that you can actually get rid of the superoxide that's really toxic in the mitochondria and convert it to hydrogen peroxide. Now that sounds terrible because hydrogen peroxide isn't so good for us either, but unlike superoxide, cannot get out of the mitochondria. But hydrogen peroxide can diffuse out and then get converted into harmless water. But you've got to get that superoxide out. You need estrogen. Estrogen supports a lipid profile that's healthy by moderating LDL levels by promoting the liver's LDL receptors. And it helps to keep oxidation of cholesterol down. Cholesterol is essential for life. Who here defends cholesterol? Because cholesterol you have to have. If you had no cholesterol, you would not be in good shape. Cholesterol is essential for cell membranes, for making steroid hormones, for brain function, but you don't want it to be rancid. That's oxidized. So it's been shown that when you look at LDL levels across the spectrum, it doesn't really correlate with a lot of metabolic health. What correlates is oxidized LDL. We don't want to have rancid. And estrogen protects the oxidation of LDL through this enzyme called peroxidase 1, also known as PON1. So in your free time, you can go and Google it and read about it. It's really amazing that estrogen does this, and very few people talk about it. And of course, insulin sensitivity. Estrogen maintains the glucose transporters. One of the reasons that women have all that trouble with brain health is that their brains are so hungry because they can't get the glucose in. And that's where the whole ketone thing comes from. So ketones have a different mechanism to get in the brain than the glucose. The glucose needs these glucose transporters, and that's what's genetically malfunctioning in those children that have seizures that are unrelenting. And that's why they switch them to ketones. But the brain loves glucose, but it can't get it, and it suffers, and that's why you do ketones. But wouldn't it be nice if you could maintain the glucose transport function in the first place? And vascular health. 85% of women become hypertensive by the age of 75. And estradiol promotes the function of the arteries. One of the enzymes, I mentioned nitric oxide, which I'll talk about more, is prostacyclin. So have you ever heard of COX enzymes? So there's COX-1 and there's COX-2. COX-1 is the one that would be around all the time. It keeps things quiet, it keeps the arteries dilated, it prevents blood from clotting, okay? And when you have an inflammation needed, because you have like an invader, an infection, then you trigger COX-2. That's an inducible enzyme that's triggered by inflammation. And so that should be quiet. Estrogen keeps COX-2 quiet and maintains COX-1. And prostacyclin is how it works. So prostacyclin prevents blood clotting. Estrogen doesn't cause blood clots. It's so crazy. Oral estrogen does through a totally different mechanism through the liver by inducing clotting factors. But actual natural estradiol is anti-blood clotting through this enzyme prostacyclin, which maintains vasodilatation and sort of a calm thing. So it counters thromboxane, which increases blood clotting. Nature did not evolve for us to kill ourselves with our own hormones. They're really protective. And here's just showing a nice picture. ER stands for estrogen receptor, and there's our little E2s. And so just to see, here's the nucleus. This is an artery. Okay, here's the blood. Here's the endothelium. And now it's showing, and here's the mitochondria. See, everywhere you look, you see E2, 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 everywhere E2. And I wanted to show you for you guys. See, it says aromatase. So aromatase is the enzyme that converts testosterone to estradiol. This is how men get their estrogen in their arteries, from testosterone. That's why low testosterone is associated in men with poor vascular health. And in women, you actually get the estrogen that comes in, and then it has this whole sequence of events that you don't have to go through, but it ends up with vasodilatation by the production of nitric oxide, maintaining proper artery health and increasing like collaterals, increased cell survival, and reduced reactive oxygen species, all from estradiol. And here's just showing how it maintains nitric oxide synthase, and I won't go through it, but it really counteracts inflammation, but up to a point. And here it just shows when you have high nitric oxide, all these wonderful things happen in the body. And nitric oxide doesn't get its due, but nitric oxide is one of the mechanisms for how the body maintains all the homeostatic mechanisms. When you don't have enough, look at all the things that happen. Oh, that looks just like menopause. So one way of looking at menopause is loss of estradiol, which results in loss of nitric oxide. So it's like a stepping stone. And you can see how it's all related. And here it's just, I want to just drill home the fact one more time that estrogen is the master of metabolic homeostasis. So here it shows estrogen, okay? And all the little dots are showing what's happening when you have estrogen, okay? There it shows estrogen-related receptor, and it's blocking oxidative stress, it's blocking insulin resistance, and if you don't have that, then you get all these bad things happening. All these very bad things. By the way, if anyone wants my slide deck, just email me. Okay, I'll put it up at the end because I share all these things. So you can see it later. So I just wanted to touch on the Women's Health Initiative for a second. So this is based on their initial results, way back in 2002. This is what they published as showing what happened, and it's been looked at and reworked like 1,000,000 times over. And what they found is that estradiol has nothing to do with this, right? Because this is Premarin, and Premarin increases blood clotting, so that's why you have more. And we'll talk about, and strokes are coming from blood clots. But this is pretty dramatic, how much reduction there was in colorectal cancer and hip fractures. But the problem is this only went on for about like 4 years. Breast cancer takes at least 20 years to develop. So if a woman was on Prempro and she got diagnosed with breast cancer 2 years into the study, what on earth does that prove? It didn't prove causation, that's for sure. Maybe promotion, but not causation. Okay. So what they found, surprise, in the women who were just on the conjugated estrogen, the Premarin, and this went on after the original study even closed down, they found that they had a lower risk of breast cancer. And what they found is that overall mortality was substantially decreased when you look at other studies. So a 30 to 50% reduction in overall mortality. It seems pretty substantial to me. So you already got a clue that I love estrogen, and it's not the answer to every problem. It's just part of the solution. Because I have another surprise.
By the way, Dr. Gersh, what do you think is the most, I don't think this microphone. What is the most common perception, what's the most common opinion among the average non-integrative gynecologist about HRT right now?
They still have, use it only if you absolutely must at the smallest dose for the shortest amount of time. And I'm going to try to hurry up to show you that that is really wrong, really wrong. There's so much fear of estrogen, and that's why everyone who leaves here tonight should leave loving estrogen, not fearing estrogen. People are afraid of all the wrong things. People are afraid of fruit. And they say, I'm not going to eat a banana, it's going to give me diabetes. I can tell you that's not why people get diabetes, because they ate a banana, or they ate an apple, or they ate an orange. They should be afraid of all the chemicals, and the pollution, and the lack of nutrients, not, and the loss of estrogen. It's so crazy. People are afraid of the wrong things. We have to tell them to be, if they're going to be afraid, at least be afraid of the right things, and then do something about it. So breast cancer, here was an interesting study, and I just wanted the conclusion is that the increased risk occurred when they gave the progesterone continuously. So I'm going to tell you right up front, try to get your women patients on estrogen to use the progesterone for 14 days every month. People don't realize that progesterone in the uterus helps to prevent uterine cancer. Progesterone is proliferative in the breast. just like estrogen. There's ductal cells and there's lobular cells in the breast. Progesterone is actually proliferative. It helps to change the breast in pregnant women. So unrelenting progesterone may increase the risk of breast cancer. We don't want to give continuous progesterone. So here, what I wanted to read is in this study, what they found was that the real risk seemed to be in women who had dense breasts or had particularly genetic high risk. So you have to be really looking for dense breasts. Does anyone look at ultrasounds and looking for density? Because why would a woman in the menopause have dense breasts? I can tell you, because they have inflammation. Inflammation triggers the enzyme aromatase. Why is that? Because you make more estrogen. Why would you make more estrogen when you have inflammation? Because estrogen is about modulating inflammation. Estrogen regulates the immune cells. So when you have an inflammation, you upregulate the production of estrogen on site in that organ. Remember, most organs can make estrogen. It's called paraquat. So they make it to suppress the inflammation. The breast makes a lot of estrogen. And that's for survival, for breastfeeding. If a woman got a breast infection when she's breastfeeding and it got all infected and inflamed, she would probably stop breastfeeding and the baby would die. And she might die. So estrogen to the rescue. If you have a breast infection, the breast makes more estrogen on site to quell the inflammatory response. It's about immunomodulation. So when you have a postmenopausal woman and she is inflamed, because women become inflamed, because I showed you all that stuff, and I showed you the slide of inflammation, inflammation, inflammation. They have breast inflammation. The breast makes estrogen. The estrogen causes promotion of growth. Estrogen is about healing, growth, and proliferation for the purpose of healing. But now you have chronic inflammation, production of estrogen unrelenting, because of the upregulation of aromatase. Now you have inflammation that leads to DNA instability, DNA breakage, and estrogen proliferating. And estrogen doesn't know cancer. We did not evolve for cancer. It's like a modern disease. So estrogen sees breast cancer as our own wounded tissue, and it's trying to promote healing. If you ever wondered, how do you heal a cut? That's estrogen. That's why old people don't heal as well as young people, because it's estrogen is produced even in the skin. So that's what happens. So dense breasts is a sign of breast inflammation. Get those people on your integrative protocols to lower their body load of inflammation. There have actually been, there have actually been studies showing, and nobody does this, but actually, because I troll PubMed, that show that if you have a woman who actually has breast cancer and you give her aromatase inhibitor, so it blocks her production of estrogen, and then you actually give her back estrogen, you actually lower the risk of death, because you're blocking the production of estrogen in the breast, but you're giving estrogen that promotes immune modulation and support of all these other systems. But nobody does that. This is sort of staticky. Maybe it's me, can't get the right distance. Okay, so
okay.
We'll change it.
Can I just stop you for a second
Sure.
and ask you a question? So,
Sure.
if I'm correct, you said that the reason for using cyclical progesterone for 2 weeks versus the whole month is because it increases the risk of breast cancer if you do it?
It lowers the risk because it allows apoptosis of crappy breast cells.
So I think the general perception is that the reason why you want to cycle it is because you don't increase the risk of uterine cancer.
Well, everything that we do that promotes a more physiologic state is going to be beneficial. If I had my druthers, I would like to give every woman when she hits menopause a new set of ovaries, because that's what she needs. So when we give hormones, it's never the same as having ovarian function. We need to realize it's not even close. Ovaries put out estrogen in pulses through the day. It doesn't like put on a blob in the morning and a blob at night. It doesn't do that, or it puts out the same little bit all the time, every day. It's not that way at all. It's rhythmic, it's pulsatile, it's totally different than what we're doing. So we're doing the best we can. But whatever we can do to make it more physiologic, and I'm going to show you, and I think I planned like a 2-hour lecture, so I'll try to speed up here. But everything that you can do to try to have things more aligned with what nature expected us to have is better. So nature, there's no time in a woman's reproductive life when she has a little bit of estrogen and a little bit of estradiol the same every day. It's just not physiologic. And so the breast needs sort of a break. The uterine lining needs a break. So it's actually good for both.
Now, for women who feel that the only advantage of menopause is that they finally don't get their period anymore.
Yeah.
Is there a way that they can do progesterone maybe at a lower dose that maybe won't bring back their period?
Yeah. Here's the problem. If you use, like, say, both estrogen and progesterone at the same time, it's like you're driving a car with the brake and the gas on at the same time. So in order to do that, you really have to finesse it. So you're probably not going to put too much gas on. You're not going to, so it means you have to give very little estrogen, because you can't have any proliferation, you can't have growth. That's what the estradiol does to the uterine lining. It causes growth. So you would have to give very little, which may be below the therapeutic level for all these organs. Now, I have to tell you, and I have a slide later, FDA does not approve estrogen use for anything except hot flashes and vaginal health. So everything that you do with hormones for any other reason is off-label. So, you know, I need to give that disclaimer. That is just where we are in this like prehistoric state of understanding hormones. But I tell women, you're a woman. Women were designed to have rhythms and cycles. This is a small price to pay for health. It's a small price. Otherwise, I have to give something in a dose that is not probably going to be optimal. I have to give too little estrogen to counter too little progesterone to counter the estrogen effect, or too little estrogen so I don't grow any lining. You know, should we hold questions till the end or not? Or we can do it as we go?
How much longer is it?
Well, I'm going to try to fly through the rest of my slides. How's that?
Okay.
Is that okay? I'll try to go really fast so you get all the important points. I can't help it if this is like a long novel, you know? I told you it's a story. The mystery of menopause is like War and Peace.
Why don't we stop for just a couple of questions here?
It's your show.
I think the cyclicality is a...
Okay, let's, I have more slides, but we'll just get to them right now.
What you were saying about progesterone, would you be giving that in similar doses to what you would be giving premenopausal?
Okay, I have some slides that I'm going to show you. I am starting a study, well, I'm working on a study on trying to give physiologic hormone replacement. I mean, that's what Wiley started a long time ago, but we're going to try to actually make it scientific and actually look at outcomes and markers and levels so that we actually have data.
Great.
Because the human female, and I have a slide I'll show you, I will not leave without showing you, what happens in the menstrual cycle. You have to understand what happens in the menstrual cycle, and I don't just mean this goes up and that goes up, what happens with the receptors, with the genes, so that you can understand why just giving a hormone is not the same as giving a rhythm of hormones. It's really different. Someday people will look back and say this is what we're doing is like putting on leeches and bloodletting. This is so primitive what we're doing. It really is. But we're going to start. I'm going to be part of the study. And anyone who's interested too, email me, because we're just beginning. We're just writing up the protocol. And we're trying to get funding.
You mentioned offering liver ultrasounds. I assume you're insisting on uterine ultrasounds to monitor any abnormal growth.
If there's any abnormal bleeding, I do get an ultrasound, and I'm a gynecologist, so I can do endometrial biopsies too. Be careful. There was a doctor in our town here that got on the front page of the LA Times because something happened with one of her hormone patients and she didn't get a uterine biopsy for a long time. So, you know, every one of you who's not a gynecologist should have a good friend who's a gynecologist. Could be me, I'm a friend, but you know, someone that you trust, that you can work with, so that when you have a problem, you don't just keep trying to play with the hormones, that you definitively show that there's nothing going on. Because hormones do not prevent, even when you give it exactly the conventional way or any, it doesn't make it that you can't get endometrial cancer. It just doesn't increase the risk. Right? So don't be shy about getting abnormalities checked out or any concerns.
So I love that the way that you're talking about, you know, the natural cycle. But I'm curious because you say that in the same sentence that it sounds like you're saying that menopause isn't actually a natural thing. Women are supposed to go through menopause and the hormones are supposed to change. So I just would love to hear how you put them together, because I know you have. So
sure. So 100% it's natural. It's like when the cardiologists see a cardio, you know, an echocardiogram and it shows diastolic dysfunction and they say, well, it's normal. Well, that woman is at high risk for going into heart failure down the road. So I don't think that's so good. So there are some species on this planet, there's some species of octopus that lay their eggs, the female lays its eggs, and then you know what happens to her? She dies. And there are salmon that swim upstream and they spawn and they die. Okay, here's a very important takeaway. Everything in our bodies is designed for reproductive success. When you are no longer a reproductive creature, nature has no plan for you. Now, in some species, they die. Most species end reproduction and they end life at the same time. We are lucky, but nature, I used to wonder about this. Your question, I said, why is it that everything in the female body links to estrogen and then nature took it away? It's like, duh, nature doesn't care about me. You know, it's like, it just is, that's why it's so crazy that we spend so much effort destroying the fertility of young females, right? Oh, they don't want to have babies now, so the solution is to destroy their fertility. Now, temporarily, hopefully, but you're taking away their hormones. Are there hormones in a birth control pill? No. Those are actually endocrine disruptors. If you go to the US site for toxicology, it's NIH funded, National Institutes of Health, toxicology, and you look up the ingredients of oral contraceptives, they officially are listed as endocrine disruptors. Ethinyl estradiol, endocrine disruptor. They're not hormones and there is no rhythm, as I want to show you this slide. So we are really challenging the health of all these young women, and I see them in my office. Every system in the body needs these hormones and their cycle. And so they're already having gut problems, brain problems, musculoskeletal problems. They're like 28. They started on birth control pills when they were 15 or 16, been on it continuously, sometimes older, and then they just go out Zumba dancing, and they go like this, and they rip their labrum in their shoulder. I mean, they didn't and they go to the orthopedist who says, oh, well, you have a labral tear. It's like, you're 28. What is this? You know, they do little things and they're ripping knees and ankles. The minor traumas are creating major damage. And I'm seeing this right and left. I'm seeing young women and they're on antidepressants. They have had 20 courses of antibiotics for urinary tract infections ever since they turned like 16 because they have no estrogen support of their genital urinary tract systems. If you go back and if you get my slides and look, you see, oh my gosh, every system. So they're having problems with every system. You know what they are having? Premature aging. And they have a new study that just came out that showed that women on birth control pills never produce bone density to the optimal level compared to women not on birth control pills. And I already told you, bone isn't boring. Bone is about metabolic health, about mobility, about everything. And so what are we doing to their muscles, to their joints? There are receptors for estrogen on tendons and ligaments. That's why they're falling apart, cartilage and so on. So basically, to answer the question, it's natural but crappy and bad. And any woman who fights gray hair can fight all the other disabilities of aging, as far as I'm concerned. Anyone who wants to be natural, I have no problem. Every one of my patients is not on hormones. And going on hormones, okay, here's my analogy. Life and being healthy is like a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. Hormones are the center 400 pieces. But even if you have them, remember, after menopause, you can't replace ovarian function. This is a very primitive, facsimile of ovarian function. But you have those other 600 pieces all around the puzzle. And if you don't maintain them, then you're not going to have much of a picture for your health. So they're the lifestyle component. Exercise, nutrition, stress control, sleep, environmental toxins, all those things are 600 pieces of the puzzle of being healthy. So the hormones are the centerpiece, but all the others are the support and frame. So you got to do it all. That's why I really dislike hormone clinics, where people just go in and they get, especially a hormone pellet. I'm sorry if any of you do pellets, but I'm really anti-pellet because that's the anti-physiologic. And I'm about recognizing that I am way too stupid to outsmart nature. So I just want to mimic nature. I don't want to go against it. That's why the more I'm in practice, the more and more I'm a lifestyle doctor, because I don't micromanage the body. I don't know how to do that. Maybe briefly, but mostly I want to set it on the right course and let it manage itself. And that's what estrogen does. It regulates all those enzymes in the body, all those pathways. I can't micromanage. You take a person that has all these problems and then you try to micromanage each of their problems with a drug. We can't do that. That's why it's like a bad joke on everybody. So we want to give the body what it needs foundationally and then let it free to do its thing. So I'm going to run through. I'm just going to show really quickly that estrogen is actually anti-breast cancer when it's physiologic. Yeah.
I had a quick question.
Oh, sure.
Do you find a relationship between cystic breasts and dense breasts?
They often are together, but a lot of times women who have cystic breasts, they actually have iodine deficiency. So there are certain organs in the body that love iodine: the brain, the thyroid, breasts, and ovaries. So when you see a young woman and she has lots of ovarian cysts over and over, the solution is not to give her birth control pills, it's to give her a little iodine. And same thing with breast cysts, that is often the case. So just go back for 1 second, just to show you that this is a tumor suppressor gene that's upregulated in the breasts of women with higher serum estrogen. Estrogen protects epithelial cells from uncontrolled proliferation. It's protective. Nature did not create women to get breast cancer. There's so many protective mechanisms. Next. And here, this one shows that this particular gene is lower in women when they have higher levels. And what does this gene do? It actually increases aromatase. Remember I mentioned that inflammation triggers activation of the enzyme aromatase to make more estrogen. But when you have plenty of estrogen, it controls the inflammation, so then you don't need to upregulate this enzyme. So that's where that whole study that nobody pays any attention to, where they took women with breast cancer, blocked aromatase, and then gave them estrogen. And they did great. But nobody does that. So here, this just shows the mechanism. You have inflammation, you're making an inflammatory prostaglandin E2, and then it triggers the CYP, the 19A1, that's part of the cytochrome P450 system. That is the enzyme that promotes the aromatase. And then you see you're turning estrogen into testosterone. And here's another gene that's regulated in women that have high serum estrogen. It actually causes cells to stay together. Metastases are what kill women with breast cancer, not just having breast cancer in the breast. Estrogen maintains the gene that maintains cohesion of cells so they don't break off and metastasize.
Right.
And when you have breast cancer, it completely alters the way the genes are expressed. You've heard of genetic expression. Cancer changes the genetic expression, or what causes the cancer changes the genetic expression. And when you have breast cancer, it's like exactly the opposite. So when all the things that I say are in place when you have a normal healthy woman with high rhythmic estrogen, when you have breast cancer, the estrogen function becomes completely opposite. The genes are expressed differently, and estrogen becomes proliferative, and it creates a positive drive to growth. So estrogen is different in breast cancer. P53, the guardian of the genome. So this particular gene helps when a cell is damaged, P53 is increased in order to either repair or kill, so that bad cells just kill themselves. So here it just shows what happens. Estrogen is key to P53 activation. And this is just showing it again. And I mentioned that estrogen lowers blood clotting, the opposite of what a lot of people think. And in here, this is a study that was published that showed that high endogenous concentrations of estradiol and testosterone in women and men are not associated with increased risk of blood clots. And I'm not going to go into too much, but I'll just tell you estrogen is really important for the brain, okay? Really important. And estrone, which is a metabolite of Premarin, an oral estrogen, does not work on the brain. In fact, the brain hates estrone, it loves estradiol. And estriol has very little impact on the brain. It's not brain protective. That's why people say they have like pregnancy brain, because they have all that estriol. And just to go back, so estrogen maintains the circadian rhythm, which is essential for everything. Next one. And this is just to show you here how reproduction links to the circadian rhythm. SCN stands for suprachiasmatic nucleus, and ER beta, ER alpha, those are that control the kispeptins that cause the release of the gonadotropins that cause menstrual cycles. And we now know that the circadian rhythm is very key to metabolic health. Reproductive health and metabolic health are one. When we lose our reproductive health, we lose our metabolic health. It's that simple. And when you don't have proper circadian rhythm, you look like Cinderella at 55. There you see her. I knew you'd recognize her, right? Oh, poor Cinderella. So what are we going to do? I'll let you go. So I do all these things. We do all the nutraceuticals, we do exercise, nutrition, and we'll just touch on hormones. So this is where I'm going to start a study to look at physiologic, but let's look at conventional. So basically what I'm saying is give the body what it's designed to have, right? So we're not designed to have made-up chemicals, like they call it progestin. Progestin is a made-up word, and I'll let you continue here. So synthetic ones are what are the real problem. They're very different. Okay. And here's the structure for those of you who enjoy organic chemistry. Who liked organic chemistry? One person. My hair put on fire in organic chemistry. I was leaning over a Bunsen burner. Oh, that smelled bad. At least I did this bad. It was in a ponytail. Otherwise, well. Oh well. Anyway, so it's not my favorite subject. And here, you know, the real one and the pretend one are totally different structures. And here's what's available for now. You all know these products. So I mentioned that it's best to try to go for 14 days. That's that's what women would normally have. I know they always talk about 12, but I go 14. There is no approved testosterone products. Testosterone goes down in women. It's separate from menopause. By age 40, the average woman has half the testosterone level she had at age 20. And testosterone is about many things, including sex drive, but much more than that. But why would it go down? Because nature doesn't want women at age 40 to care about making babies, right? It's all about reproductive success. It's not helpful if a lot of women in their 40s are getting pregnant. Although now that's the in vogue thing to do, and they're freezing their eggs, so all these, reproductive life is short, and you gotta get to it early. So just a moment on estriol. I know some of you love Bias. I do not use it any longer. It doesn't protect the bone or the heart. It's very important in pregnancy. Very important because it has tremendous receptor function in the urogenital tissues. So when a woman has a baby, that baby has to fit out the vagina. It's like a snake swallowing a pig. It's like, do you ever wonder that? How is that pig getting through? Well, it's a totally different structure. It's really stretchy. If you could somehow miraculously put a full-term baby in a woman who doesn't have estriol, who just has estradiol, and then she was going to deliver that baby, she just ripped to smithereens. So this is amazing. And estriol is beta, predominantly beta. High beta downregulates alpha. Now, why would you downregulate alpha in pregnancy? Because I told you alpha's on the innate immune cells, the macrophages, the mast cells. Do you want your immune system to attack your baby? No, it's all beautifully orchestrated. So estriol is amazing for the urogenital system, and it helps to block the growth of the breasts, so women don't like it this big with the breasts. And it really is important for the immune system because it downregulates the alpha receptors on the innate immune cells. But I just told you that it downregulates the innate receptors for estrogen so that the immune cells, the innate immune cells, are less functional. That's why women who are pregnant will more likely die if they get the flu. You've heard that, right? It's so dangerous for women who are pregnant to get the flu or chicken pox. They often get pneumonia. They get much worse outcomes because their innate immune system is down-regulated. Do you want to do that to your menopausal women? Remember I told you women live longer than men. I didn't mention that, but they do, because they have this robust immune system that protects them in epidemics and from infections. So if you give them all that estriol, you're down-regulating their innate immune system. We don't know what that means, but I don't want to play that kind of, put that power out there that I don't know what I'm wielding with this power of altering their immune system.
But couldn't a counter argument to some of what you're saying is, since most women don't take hormones after menopause,
Right.
And women live longer, then why would that be if they don't have estrogen?
Well,
If
well, there's a couple of things. One, it's actually built into our X chromosomes that we have part of our immune system is not just from estrogen, it's actually built into our X chromosome. So women have 2 big X's. Men have 1 big X and a little Y. And so the X chromosome, the extra one in women, gets deactivated. But actually, about 20% of the genes on the extra X chromosome stay active. Most of them are involved with immune health. And in embryologic times, there is a brief window when both X's are working and they epigenetically modify how the genes respond. So we are actually innately better off. But in terms of estrogen, we still make estrogen. We just make it in the target, in the organs themselves, and so the innate immune cells still have their estrogen receptors, and whatever estrogen we have is still working on them. But the truth is, this is an area of no research. You know how much research has been done on systemic estriol use in women? Like pretty much nothing. So what I'm telling you is how I feel, that estriol, knowing what I know, that estriol downregulates the alpha receptor on the immune cells. And it's not just the alpha receptor on the immune cells. All of the appetite centers in the brain are controlled by alpha, okay? The circadian rhythm is very linked with both alpha and beta. So I just don't know how I'm manipulating things. There is no data. I'm just doing my little Hippocratic oath thing of do no harm. I don't know if I'm doing harm, so I'm not going to do it. But I don't really know. I just know the science of what estriol does. And so right now, I'm recommending for conventional use, pulsing the progesterone as I mentioned. Maybe we should, if we're giving the same dose of estrogen all the time, take a little break. We don't know. There's concern that you do downregulate the receptors by giving continuous estrogen. And that would never happen if you give it in a physiologic dosing. But that is totally off-label. We're already going off-label, right? Okay.
Is that oral or cream?
For the progesterone? So most women will tolerate the oral, but for women who don't, about 10% of women just can't tolerate oral. Then you have to go with cream, and then you have to monitor them, because we have no data to show what the effect is on the endometrium. But yes, you can, but you have to monitor them.
What would be the dosage? Would it be a similar dosage for cream as it is for oral?
So creams are absorbed super differently in different women. In fact, so is the estrogen, by the way. So when they did the original studies with the patch, what did they find? If you gave 10 women the same dose of patch, they had totally 10 different levels. It's absorbed so differently. So I am now using, for topical, I'm using salivary measurements, because the the serum levels for topical progesterone don't really tell you anything useful, because you know that. It's really a problem. So I use now salivary, and there's at least some reasonable data on that. So when you're using progesterone as a cream, you have to know you're way off label. You need to be cautious. Make sure you tell the patient, because we just don't have the data. I don't want anyone in this room to get in trouble, ever. Because I sometimes, I'm also a forensic medical expert, and I'm a medical reviewer for the expert reviewer for the Medical Board of California. So I always want people to be really cautious, because everyone in this room is an outlier. Like, this is like almost like a secret society, we talk about things other people don't even talk about, so many things, and I don't want anyone to get in trouble. So I always want people to know what is off and on label, and to be careful, like you mentioned, if there's a question, check it out. You don't want to be on the front page of the LA Times because they rated you, we don't want that to happen to anybody. And so we can just go through these, because you can have them. These are just things to check on, ask your patient. So keep going. So I just put in a bunch of history things so you can have. So this is just important things to ask about, so you can look at this later. And so it's really important to know that low estrogen or absent estrogen can result in loss of genomic control. So this idea of the lowest amount of estrogen is insane. Okay? Estrogen maintains genomic stability. So we don't want to have really low. Okay?
By the way, where are we in terms of the research on bioidentical hormones? What's the best research we have to back them up right now?
Well, we have the KEEP study, which just came out with something that I'm looking into more. That's why I didn't bring it up. But that was a 4-year study. And they're looking for endpoints in cardiovascular findings in women who are starting out at 52 and have no problems. And then they're putting them on hormones, or even not on hormones. And they're comparing over the course of 4 years. So I think it's really limited data. How many women have dementia in their mid-50s? Fortunately, not many. How many women are already having strokes and heart attacks? Usually, remember, fortunately, not that quickly. So it hasn't been that helpful. So what we desperately need more studies. That's why anyone who's interested, let me know, because it's really terrible. And I'll show you that I do have some studies up here. There was a large Danish study, large meaning had over 1,000 people. And what they found is after 10 years on conventional bioidentical hormones at the end of 10 years, the hormone users had half the incidence of cardiovascular events and no change in any cancers compared to the control group that didn't use. So that's pretty darn good. So no cancers difference in 10 years and half the incidence of any kind of cardiovascular event. And the KEEP study showed a 30 to 50% decrease in all-cause mortality. What is there out there that can lower your risk of dying from everything? So that's pretty good. But, oh, that's okay. We'll talk to you later. I know. We're kidding. I know. And I was too. And so this is what a menstrual cycle looks like. And you can see there's nothing static about it. The blue is estradiol, the progesterone, and then let me show you something here. So you can't leave till I show you this. So everyone has rhythms, right? Well, we have circadian, we have lunar, and, okay, we'll continue. So this is what it's like when you're on birth control pills.
Yeah.
That is not a rhythm. Oh, there's no rhythm. Doesn't it drive you crazy when women come in? I had a patient that came in just recently and said, oh, I had these crazy periods for years. And then she went in to tell me, like, I didn't have any for a while, and then I had spotting. She was on birth control pills for almost 20 years. All of that was on the birth control pill. I said, that's not a period. That's not you. That's meaningless. That's your body's response to birth control pills. You know, now we have to see what you do now that you're 35 and you've been on birth control pills since you were 15. Oh my goodness, that's not good for someone. So here, we'll let you change. Oh, we already talked about this, about the daily. But here, and you can look at this. This is what happens during the menstrual cycle. When the estrogen peaks, you upregulate the tumor suppressor gene P53, and you have a rest of bad things happening. You increase estradiol receptors, you increase progesterone receptors. Okay, that's what's happening when you peak your estrogen with ovulation. When you peak your progesterone, you cause crappy breast cells to kill themselves. You promote apoptosis through the increase in the P53 suppressor gene, which I mentioned. The P53 suppressor gene, when it gets the tumor suppressor gene, it either causes healing or it kills off those bad guys. And that's what happens when you have a peak of your estrogen and your progesterone. Nature took care of us by killing the bad cells. So this is what I want to have research on so that we can see if we can somewhat reproduce this and actually get our genomics to do the right thing and kill off the bad stuff. And also in the endometrium, so that you trigger the death of bad cells in the endometrium as well. Okay, next one. And so here, I always argue against the term estrogen dominance because it always makes it sound like estrogen is evil. And really, it's usually progesterone deficiency that we're talking about. And that's what's happening if you don't have a proper peak. Another thing that you might want to know, a lot of people give progesterone, like luteal phase, because they know your progesterone is too low. If you have chronic inflammation, that will downregulate the production of progesterone. So you have to think, why is their progesterone low? Why do they have luteal phase deficiency? Then you have to go into your functional medicine and nutrition routine because it means they're inflamed. That's why they're not producing proper progesterone. Nature does not want an inflamed woman to reproduce, so it shuts down reproduction. And then you're trying to get them to have babies, and they're going to have bad pregnancies and have unhealthy babies. So we want to get women healthy long before they get pregnant. And so this is just showing all the sequence of events. So I told you that we definitely need, if you don't have enough hormones, then you have decreased testosterone receptor function, progesterone, you lose your tumor suppressor gene function, you get bad bones, downregulation of estrogen. And this is what happens as women lose their peak performance. So this is just showing that there's such a difference between any kind of replacement hormones compared to our natural rhythms. And this is a Danish study that showed that when you have cycling, of the progesterone, this is talking about cycling the progesterone, that it helps to prevent coronary heart disease better than static. So that's another reason you say, you want something that's going to help protect you from maybe breast cancer and heart disease? Have a period. It's not that bad. They're not going to be that bad. Okay, this is all the warnings on estrogen packaging, just to bring you back to reality. This is what we face. These are a package warning, and it's scary. And so estrogen, bioidentical hormones can improve quality of life. There's so many potential benefits. Cycling is better. So don't be afraid of estrogen. So when you have proper everything, you have great hormones, and you live with the light, you eat, and sometimes you don't eat. You have love in your life, you have purpose, you have a healthy liver, then all things can be together, and you can help every Cinderella in your practice to live that happily ever ending. I can't even say it, to have a happily ever after ending. Thank you.
Are you recommending DIM?
Yes, I do.
Every patient that you give HRT to?
I start with, so everyone in my practice comes in and we do what we call an anti-inflammatory reset, which sometimes other people call a detox. But we don't use detox only because a lot of my patients have other doctors, it's just a terminology thing, and they don't understand what detox is. They don't understand, I call it a detox off of crap, off of a bad lifestyle, bad food, processed food, and by doing that, you're going to help your innate mechanisms of your body, including detoxification pathways, to work better. But other doctors don't understand that. So I just call it a reset, and it's essentially like a detox, and it includes DIM, okay? And then after that, I totally individualize it. I don't keep my patients on DIM indefinitely. We don't really have data to support. I'm very data-driven. There's really no data to support it long-term. So I switch and I use food as medicine. Who here does a lot of work with nutrition? Yeah, so food is our medicine. So I try to get them to eat, the cruciferous vegetables and upregulate, and I do a lot of work with fasting and so on. But I do individualize it, but everyone starts out with it. I do.
What about calcium D-glucarate?
So I actually use it, but here's the real data. There is no good data. There is no good data to support it. I think if I use it for a little while, it's not going to be a problem. So here's the thing. And some women in the menopause, actually, by recycling the estrogen, may actually be really beneficial. And I actually have a slide, and I have like tons of slide decks, and I actually sort of created this one for today, but I have a slide that actually shows that it's really a problem, that if you get rid of your beta-glucuronidase, that when you have it, women in menopause actually had healthier urogenital function when they had their beta-glucuronidase working. So I like to use it just short term.
Is there any validity in seeing, if you see elevated beta-glucuronidase on a stool test, as that being a justification for using calcium D-glucarate?
I think that we can use that, but there's actually no data to support that, which we need. We need data. And when we do things without data, that's when other doctors who actually are not really evidence-based, but they think they are, because a lot of the data they're working on is actually, they've done studies on conventional medicine, and something like well over half has no supporting data at all, but they do it anyway.
I think even higher than that.
Yeah, it's probably like 80%. But they, we're under such scrutiny now. They're doing all kinds of things on Facebook now. They're censoring. Like if you write natural medicine, they actually censor it. You've heard that? There's a lot of problems. So, it's almost like there's a secret, police force out there, like, watching us. So, we just want to be careful and try to be as evidence-based as we can in everything that we do. Because if you're held up in a court of law and they say, show me the data, and you have none, then it's going to be more difficult.
Yeah, well, Google now has a health division, and they own, they have part ownership of 2 different pharmaceutical
I know,
companies.
and that's only going to make
So-
it worse. It's terrible. That's right. So it's not an accident that they're now scrutinizing for the words natural medicine and trying to block it.
Question?
Yes.
I have a couple questions, but before people leave,
May I have your attention, please? The library will be closing in 30 minutes. The second floor restrooms will be closing in 15 minutes. If you need a library card, please go to the customer services desk immediately. Thank you.
Okay, I do have a couple questions, but before people leave, I just wanted to make an announcement to share some information. There's a doctor who's the first radiation biologist in the world, okay? He's done 40 years of research in antioxidants, and now he's done a total review of the literature in cannabis. So he's actually coming to Palm Springs on September 14th. However, I have a connection with him, so I'm going to arrange to do a webinar. So if people want to contact me, leave me your card, or just write down your email address, I can send out the email when it's going to happen. Because he's created the first micronutrient formula with CBD. So if you're interested, he's going to put on a webinar that's going to be catered to healthcare professionals. So just come see me. My question was, what is the oldest person who you have treated on hormone therapy, and do you take hormones?
Well, the second is easy. Yes, I do. And the first is, I think, 90, that I can think of off the top of my head, 93.
What percentage of your menopausal patients have like occasional or regular periods?
Lots.
Lots, so most of them.
Yeah, because that's sort of the problem, if you can call it a problem. If you're going to use estrogen off-label for health, then you probably have to have enough to build up the lining of the uterus, because that's what women in the reproductive years, the healthiest years of life, have. So there is a correlation between estrogen level and uterine lining thickness and the overall health of the body. So it's just a cost of business of trying to be healthy.
Yeah.
You know, if you think, do you want the health of the average 65-year-old woman or the average 25-year-old woman? And what comes along for the ride? And just, you have to make your own decision. Every one of my patients gets information and makes their own decision.
So you talked about estrogen peaking, which implies that you're cycling it, so what's
Well,
the
this
idea
is,
about
what
that?
I'm showing is what really happens in a woman who is cycling.
Yeah.
And remember, you lose that. That's why women on birth control pills have an increased risk of both, and this is in cancer.gov, the government website, significant increased risk of cervical cancer and increased risk of breast cancer. So that is not controversial, that's in that site. So in postmenopausal women, we need the science and the data. That's why we're starting the study, right? But this is what we should do.
Yeah.
This is what we should do. But this is not what, you have to think back on history. The origins of giving hormones was not for health, it was suppression of hot flashes.
Right.
And it has never really changed. So it makes no sense, but, and Bob doesn't know this, but I'll tell him right now. So I work, or I'm friends with, I actually haven't really worked with, a very top-notch cardiologist who just approached me yesterday. He's a reviewer for many top cardiology journals, that he is looking at an article, and if it gets approved, and he's going to suggest it does with a few minor revisions, then he wants to write an editorial about hormones that would be published in a major journal. And I have worked on him for over 2 years because he is a high-end cardiologist. I won't mention his name till the article comes out, till the editorial comes out. But the first thing he said, I met him at a conference, and we got snowed in, and neither one of us could leave, so he was a prisoner of mine. And so I thought, I'm going to convince this high-end cardiologist who thinks that estrogen is toxic to women, that it's not. And so I've worked with him on this subject, and now he is a believer. You know, I'd send him articles. Now, granted, I would send him article after article, and he would send back the comment, this is a study on mice. things like that. It's like, well, we have so much in common with mice. Let's do a study on humans. I say, okay, this is mice. Let's do humans. So he's coming around. So I'm
You might be
hoping.
doing it off-label, but in general, nobody's doing that.
What?
Cycling the estrogen.
Well, people are cycling the estrogen.
Yeah.
So that's what is like widely, and there are a lot of people doing it, and I think it makes sense, but we have no data. And that's really an issue.
Yeah.
When you do things with no data, because we live in a very strict world, where if you say that you're doing something and you have not one published piece of literature to support it, then if something happens, you can be hung. We have to be careful about everything we do. That doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that you have to make sure you pick the right patients and that you give them choice, and you make sure that they know that it's legal. It's not illegal. Of course it's legal. It's just off-label. So you need to tell them. How many drugs are used off-label? Like most of them, right? But when we use hormones off-label, we're going into an area that we need to make sure that we tell our patients that this is off-label. And some patients say, I don't care, because I know. These are the patients that come to us. They say, I don't care, because I understand and I want what's really best for me. I can't help it that you and I are at least 20 years ahead of the pack. Because everyone in this room is at least 20 years ahead of the pack. And they say it takes almost 20 years before science, or I should say clinical practice catches up with the science. And that's just where it is. So, it's really, I'm not against anything that is going to help patients. Just make sure you explain it, and that's their choice, and they know what you're doing is off-label.
Yeah.
Back to contraindications for HRT, you're talking about dense breasts. A lot of patients are talking to me about breast implants now with all this new information. Would breast implants also be a contraindication for HRT?
It is not. However, I do talk to all my patients about breast implants, and just recently, the Allergan produced breast implant that had the textured cover was taken off the market forever. It caused deaths in women in Europe of rare B-cell lymphoma. So these things are foreign bodies in the human body. That's what happens when they get encapsulated. And the saline ones are not really safer because by 10 years out, the covers are starting to degrade, and you can have a little bit of leakage, microscopic leakage, and you can actually get mold growing. I know, this is terrible stuff. I encourage my patients to explant. And then they can do fat transplant. So most of us have a little extra fat, and we can just relocate it.
That's good.
And it's not bad. It comes out looking fine. And it's a lot better than having this foreign body that you have. People don't know that. They're not told you have to replace them every 10 years. By 10 years, it's now expected that every breast implant will have microscopic leaks.
Yeah.
10 years. That's a lot of years if a woman put it in when she was like 22. Oh my gosh, every 10 years. And that's thousands of dollars. Thousands.
Not to speak of which, I'm actually a radiologist, but I'm also in integrative holistic medicine. But I see the contracted implants all the time. And it's really a problem. There's so much scar tissue that you can't push the implant back. So it's really the limit in terms of really.
And if you have them removed, you have to make sure you get a plastic surgeon that takes out every last bit of the encapsulated material, that fibrous material, because that is also toxic and inflammatory for patients. I know, so it's a big deal. You got to get the right plastic surgeon who doesn't just leave behind a bunch of bad stuff in there. Yeah.
I understand that from the Weitz study. I think it was that if you had start estrogen for 10 years after menopause, that there was an increased risk of stroke or heart attack. Are you familiar with that?
Well, they're talking about Premarin. That's all using Prempro and Premarin from the Women's Health Initiative. But here's my thought on it, okay?
It could also seem that, I just want to add that they those people who were not on it before, they all of a sudden just gave it to them, like they didn't build up to it or anything.
Well,
So
you
their
know,
bodies were-
the body adjusts, and if you take a woman who's almost 70 and she's pretty unhealthy, and then you put her on a bunch of oral estrogen and medroxyprogesterone acetate, I would not expect her to do great. You know, I'm surprised it wasn't worse, actually. You know, so that's really a good point, that these were not good candidates. But here's the thing, estrogen, the earlier you start, the better. The earlier is better, because prevention is always better than trying to fix. But we know, and this is very strongly advocated by the North American Menopause Society, to use hormones, estrogen, for vaginal health, and DHEA, and mostly estrogen. So at any age, you can now officially give estrogen vaginally for vaginal health. And guess what happens? It gets better. Now, not perfect, but it improves. So if you can have vaginal improvement with estrogen at age 78 or 80, why would you not think you would have some vascular improvement? Why would you think the vagina is completely different than any other tissue in the body? So we know that the vagina can always do better with estrogen at any age. So to me, that means every tissue can. And Dale Bredesen, in his Reversing Alzheimer's, gives estrogen to all the women with dementia at any age, because estrogen is so important for brain health.
Another thing I hear a lot of women tell me is they're only going to take their estrogen for 10 years. Their doctor told them to stop in 10 years.
Right.
Old thinking.
Yeah, that is old thinking. Thank you. Yeah. It's like, now I want to be really bad off, and I want to have all those processes that I showed you, where when you don't have estrogen and your brain gets inflamed and your fat doesn't function right and your immune cells are going crazy and your liver is getting fatty. I want it. Like, I never want it. You know, we're the category that they're going to have to claw it out of my hand.
Okay.